Ja, jeg tenkte jeg skulle vise hvordan en Turbofan Motor fungerer på disse her flya. Til det er å si at samtlige fly, passasjerfly, militærfly, har denne type motorer. Så da skal jeg ta og vise noen få videosnutter, og så går det an å komme med spørsmål etterpå, for det står jo på engelsk her, men jeg skal prøve å forklare litt underveis. Så da kan vi egentlig bare sette i gang. Det du ser her er altså en slik turbomotor med, jeg vet ikke, ja, mange har vel tatt fly og kanskje også lagt merke til motorene. Og hvis du ser i fronten på motoren, så er det en vifte. Det er en vifte som tar imot luftstrømmen, som da går ikke gjennom selve motoren, men mellom et lag her åpent, hvor det er åpent, hvor luftstrømmen går igjennom. Her vil det også komme, sånn som på de flyene som sprayer da, som har med seg disse her kjemikaliene, så går det rør inn i det mellomrommet her, og med da de kjemiske stoffene. Og selvfølgelig så står det jo varme ut av motoren bak her, og her er det jo også da noe eksos. Så de forskjellige grunnstoffene eller ingrediensene som er i flybrennstoffet, det går da ut i midten her. Mens, altså som et eksosrør, da kan du si, på en bil. Mens det som du ser av det blå der, der kommer de kjemikalene inn, og det igjen vil da blande seg med eksosen og forårsake de lange stripene. Jeg skal ta nå, det var egentlig kortversjonen da, men jeg skal ta nå og så prøve å vise dere noen videosnutter. Her kan dere se altså en skannet motor, hvor den der vifta er foran, og en mindre turbovifte ligger bak der igjen. Og som sagt, den vifta foran her, den bare sørger for at luftstrømmen gjør sitt til at det får en drivkraft på fly, som utgjør faktisk 85% av skyvekraften. Og motoren, den avgir 15% av skyvekraften. Og det igjen vil da si at man snakker om, eller vi får oppgitt at flyet det tar så mye fuel, brennstoff, la man si ifra, ja, i det hele tatt det rommer ca. 25 000 liter da. Men da kan du jo prøve å regne ut hvor stort volum det trengs for å tanke 25 000 liter. Det er egentlig da bare å gå inn og så beregne volumet av en sylinder. Da har du flykroppens lengde, du har flykroppens radie, eller diameter, altså tykkelsen på flykroppen. Så det skal dere få lov til å regne ut selv. Her ser vi et tilfelle hvordan dette skjer, da, hvis vi skal kalle det det. Hvor den blå streken, det er altså luftstrømmer som går inn fra vifta og over da i det åpne rommet, og der blir altså påfyllinga av den type grunnstoffer som du skildrer ut. Så det bare indikerer hvordan det foregår. Jeg vet ikke om vi skal ta noe på den der. Den fikk jeg ikke lov til å vise, gitt. Ja vel. Ok, da kan vi ta den korte slutten her.
Where ready? Leave control aspect, fluid connection 102 Where ready, can be 124, Buffalo Riviera 104.
Se hvor gærent det er. Det er ikke mye fint. Der er det fullt av gift overalt.
Videoen 104, where ready? Leave control aspect, fluid connection 102 Where ready, can be 124, Buffalo Riviera 104.
Så ja, vi kan godt ta oss og vise den
revolutions per minute.
Let's take a look at the engines that power these aircraft. The Pratt & Whitney PW4102 turbofan is typical of the more efficient high bypass designs used in commercial and military transport aircraft. This engine develops thrust in two different ways simultaneously. Keep in mind that engine combustion is required to produce the water vapor necessary to create a real contrail. Looking at the red arrow, a small stream of air enters the engine core to undergo combustion via aviation fuel. But this provides only 15% of the total thrust, along with a relatively small amount of water vapor available for any real contrail formation. And a whopping 85% of the air intake provides 85% of the thrust, as the large fan bypasses air around the combustion core to be pushed out the rear of the engine. Remember, this 85% of air as thrust does not undergo combustion and therefore contains no additional water vapor for real contrail formation. Looking at the yellow arrows, the bypass stage provides the best opportunity for injection of aerosol, since there are no critical engine parts to be exposed to the corrosive and damaging effects of the various light and dark aerosol compounds being sprayed. Although we know there are many methods of deploying aerosols, there is little evidence that these various chemical compounds are contained in the aviation fuel at this time. However, we expect the method of deployment will likely change over time. In a majority of cases, the evidence for bypass stage injection of aerosols outweighs the theory that the chemicals are being dumped into the engine thrust via the pylon drain tubes. These documents confirm the pylon engine drain tubes are designed to discharge fluids accumulated from the power plant, including fuel, oil, hydraulic fluid, and water. Considering the two stages of thrust, we can imagine a donut, where the thrust from the combustion stage in the center creates the hole in the larger donut of bypass thrust containing the aerosols. The noticeable bifurcation or split in these jet trails demonstrates the combustion phase of thrust containing no aerosols is creating a hole of transparency inside the larger donut of aerosols deployed in the bypass phase, hidden beneath the cowling of the engine. This observation is consistent with the hypothesis that aerosols are injected into the bypass phase where over 80% of the engine thrust is developed. A close look at the visible trails shows the aerosols are already well formed as they exit the engine. This observation would not be possible if the aerosols were pumped from a pylon tube external to the engine.
The turbofan engine is a complex synchronization of several components working together as two parts. A core section that produces power to drive the propulsor section that produces thrust. Thrust is a force created by the acceleration of air. This phenomenon is simply an application of Newton's second law of motion, commonly expressed as force equals mass times acceleration. It is this force that propels the aircraft. To see how this thrust is developed, let's look at the internal workings of Pratt & Whitney's PW40-102 turbofan engine. The first component in the engine is the huge 9-foot diameter fan that rotates 2,800 times a minute at takeoff. This giant fan sucks in enough air to vacuum out the air in a 4-bedroom house in less than half a second. As the air races through the massive fan, it's separated into two streams. Only 15% of the air flows into the interior core of the engine. The remaining 85% of the air is ducted along the outside of the core and is forced through an ever-narrowing space, the fan duct, picking up speed along the way. The ratio of this air bypassing the core to the air passing through the core is called the bypass ratio. Because of its huge volume, the bypassed air only needs to accelerate a small amount in order to develop an enormous amount of thrust. Meanwhile, the other 15% of the air has entered the first component in the engine's core, the low-pressure compressor. Here, the air passes through several smaller stages, each consisting of a set of rotating blades in between a set of stationary blades. Each stage compresses the air, forcing its temperature and pressure to rise. After passing through the low-pressure compressor, the air enters the high-pressure compressor, which rotates faster and is responsible for 70% of the total pressure rise. After the air has passed through both compressors, it is 35 times higher in pressure and 1,000 degrees hotter than the outside air. The compressed air is now at the right pressure, but it is moving too fast to be efficiently ignited, so it enters a diffuser, where it slows down while remaining at the optimum temperature and pressure. The air then enters the combustor, where its energy level is greatly increased. This is accomplished by adding fuel through a series of injectors and igniting it, further increasing the temperature of the mixture by 1,600 degrees. The higher the pressure of the air, the more energy will be added during combustion, and the more efficient this process becomes. This is why the compressors were used to increase the air's pressure. Now, the superheated and compressed air mixture is ready for the next phase. Blasting through the high-pressure turbine, the high-energy air spins the blades at over 10,000 revolutions per minute. These blades are connected to a shaft that runs through the center of the engine and drives the high-pressure compressor. In fact, the only purpose of the high-pressure turbine is to extract enough energy from the air to turn the high-pressure compressor. Together, these components make up the high spool. Next, the air passes through the larger low-pressure turbine. This turbine has two purposes. First, it extracts enough energy from the air to power the low-pressure compressor at the front of the engine core. These two components are connected via a second shaft which actually passes through the center of the high spool. However, the second and more important job of the low-pressure turbine is to turn the large titanium fan blades up front. The fan is connected to the same shaft as the low-pressure compressor and low-pressure turbine. Together, these three components make up the low spool. Finally, the combusted air races out through the exhaust nozzle at the back of the engine to be accelerated one last time. The speed at which this gas exits the nozzle is called jet velocity. This exhaust stream produces only 20% of the engine's total thrust. The remaining 80% is produced by the large volume of accelerated bypass air exiting the fan duct.
Ja,